everyone, and welcome to the Her Hoop Stats podcast. By the time this is coming out, we will be just a day away from the start of the FIBA World Cup qualifying tournaments. There's 4 of them. They're happening all over the world, and it's the first step to getting into the Women's FIBA World Cup, which will take place this September in Germany. So an exciting week of basketball, international basketball coming up. And just what we need during this little break in between, the winter leagues, Unrivaled, Athletes Unlimited, and March Madness next week. So it's a fun kind of tournament. We're going to get these WNBA players, some of them. We're going to get the international teams coming up. And I mean, adding international basketball just always adds a little bit of an extra flair because then, patriotism and all that stuff comes into it. But these tournaments are going to be really fun and exciting. So my name is Chelsea. I'm here with Richard Cohen. We're going to break down all 4 tournaments going on, who's playing in them, how these teams will attempt to qualify for the World Cup, and just kind of what we think about all of the matchups going down. These tournaments were kind of decided based on different seeds, different groups. They were drawn out of pots. And so you kind of make it so that one tournament isn't like completely heavy with all the best teams in the world. They kind of even them out. So obviously, we were joking before we hit record on the podcast that it's funny how we got the 2 international people here on Her Hoop Stats to talk about the World Cup. I feel like it's fitting. You're not going to see, too much. Okay, I was about to say we're not going to see too much bias, but I'm going to talk about Canada a lot, so whatever. But yeah, Richard, how are you feeling going into these tournaments?
It's going to be interesting. I mean, there's more competition in some of the groups than the others, but yeah, I'm looking forward to it, and we should see some competitive basketball in some of the groups, and hopefully, we're going to see some good stuff. We're going to see some youngsters, some established players. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of good basketball being played.
Yeah, I mean, like last year we had the Eurobasket, the AmeriCup, like kind of the continental competitions, and those are fun, don't get me wrong, but this is the first time we're seeing a big World Cup-esque these are the qualifying tournaments, but we're on the road to the World Cup, and this is the first big international competition since the Olympics. And I mean, we're lucky that we have this 2-year cycle of World Cup, then Olympics, and so we get the joy of this fun international basketball pretty often. But we were talking before we hit record as well about how different some of these teams are looking since the Paris Olympics, and that's going to be a huge storyline going into the World Cup. Teams like Team USA especially are going through a lot of transition now when it comes to their rosters, the new generation of players who will be coming in and making an impact, players who have retired, players who are kind of now in that veteran status who maybe weren't before, and talking about who's exactly going to make these teams. So yeah, we're going to break down. Let's just start first with the format of these tournaments, because obviously these are to determine who gets into the World Cup. And when you go online and you kind of try and figure out what the rules are, they sometimes are a little confusing. So Richard, break down what these teams are fighting for in these tournaments this week.
Right. So what we have are 24 teams split into 4 groups of 6. And 4 teams from each of those groups will qualify for the World Cup. However, there are already 5 teams that are qualified for the World Cup. The 4 teams that won their respective regional tournaments in the previous cycle, which are the US from the Americas, that's Belgium from Europe, Australia from what they still call Asia, even though Australia takes part in it, and Nigeria from Africa as the 4 regional winners, and Germany as the host of the World Cup. Yeah. So those 5 teams are already in. So it will be 4 teams qualifying from each group of 6, but you have to subtract the teams that are already through. So in Group A, in China, Belgium are involved, and wherever they finish, they go through, and it's the 3 top teams in the group who aren't Belgium. Yeah. And then in Group B, same thing, top 3 who aren't US. Group C, top 3 teams who aren't Australia. And then in Group D, where they have both Germany and Nigeria, it's the top 2 teams that aren't either of those 2 because they're already in. So yeah, that ends up with 16 teams who will go through to the World Cup in September in Germany.
Yeah, and like just to clarify, so it makes 100% sense. Those 5 teams that have already qualified, they could end last. Like they could
Yep.
be the last team, and that isn't going to change anything. So for teams like the United States, Australia, et cetera, this tournament doesn't really matter, but it's also just like extra time to look at your roster, look at players, see what the matchups are, scout these various teams that you'll probably see at the World Cup. For Team USA, I mean, trying out these players who have never played before. But we'll get to the United States in a bit. Let's start with Tournament D, which is Colombia, Philippines, Germany, South Korea, France, and Nigeria. And this is the interesting one because both Germany and Nigeria have already qualified for the World Cup. So this is a group where only 2 other teams are going to advance to the World Cup. But at the same time, I mean, you can already kind of say that France will probably be one. They have a very strong team that will take one of those spots. But what do you think of Group D? Like, do you think we're going to see a big surprise here by those last teams that end up making it?
No is the easy answer. As you say, France would have to have an absolute catastrophe to fail to qualify from this group. Yeah, that is very unlikely. The interesting things there are, I mean, you're going to see a lot of players that we know from France, from playing overseas, from playing in the Olympics, from playing in the WNBA. Keep an eye maybe on Pauline Astier, who's another young guard who we might see in the WNBA sometime soon. Germany and Nigeria are already in, and we'll be using this as kind of a warm up. There's no Satu Sabali for Germany, but Niara Sabali will be there. Geiselsoder's injured as well, so won't be. Frieda Buhner is someone to watch out for in Germany. Again, she's draft eligible this year after a weird sort of rule because she played very briefly in the US in the NCAAs, which then extends the time period until you become draft eligible. So yeah, she's worth watching out for, and there'll be more on her without Satu around and without Geiselsoder, so she'll get more of the ball. Nigeria have become a solid team and consistent, and now have a more regular roster. They used to have turnover pretty much from every tournament, one to the other. You'd see like 12 new players practically. And now with Ezin Kalu, with Okonkwo, who we saw in the WNBA last year, with Musa, who had a cup of coffee with Phoenix as well, who's had a great season in Europe. Nigeria, it's going to be interesting to see whether they can be good again. They've had like upset results, and yeah, we want to see whether they can keep that rolling. Even though they're already through, they'll want to be strong, beat the teams they're supposed to beat, and then put up a good showing against teams like France and Germany to show that they're competitive on this level. Yeah. And then Korea ought to get through from this group because they're not the strongest team from Asia, but they ought to be stronger than the Philippines and Colombia, both of whom are essentially minnows at this sort of level. Korea still have Park Ji-soo, who we saw in Las Vegas in the WNBA for a few years before she stopped coming over. They have Lee Seul Kang, who was signed by a WNBA team briefly but never made it. They've got talent, they've got chemistry, but they're not as strong as they used to be, and so they're potential candidates for an upset, but the Philippines and Colombia probably aren't good enough to do it, basically. Colombia were one of the weaker teams in the Americas who managed to just about scrape through. The Philippines weren't that strong to begin with and are missing most of the players who scored any points for them in the Americup last year. So it's hard to see where they're going to find the upset unless there's a big surprise. Their leader was Vanessa De Jesus from who plays at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
So who isn't going to be there for this tournament? So I would be surprised if it's not Korea in what looks like that fight for the fourth spot, but it could happen. But yeah, it looks unlikely.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, obviously with Germany and Nigeria already in, like that's a different thing. For France, I mean, like you said, it's theirs to lose. I could see them very easily winning every game in, except, I mean, even against Germany, I think that will be a fun game. But at the same time, if you have Gabby Williams, Marine, all of, the big France roster, I mean, even Germany will probably struggle against them. And I mean, this French team isn't far off from the team that nearly won the gold medal at the Olympics, right? Like
Yeah, it's pretty
they're
much the same roster. Yes.
yeah, it's a fantastic team. So you have to think about that. Even going into the World Cup, I mean, France is going to be a huge contender like for the podium, if not for the gold, right? Like they were so close to it at the Olympics, and it's we're in a fun era where things are actually competitive with these teams.
Yeah, I mean,
But
France can continue to churn out a lot of talent. Yeah, I
oh
mean,
yeah,
your namesake Leite can't
yeah,
get in this squad
yeah.
because they have too much talent. Yeah, there's
You know what,
um
Carla? Come to
yeah.
Canada. We'll take you. You can pretend to be my cousin. Um,
She'd start for GB as well. We'll take her. She doesn't have to go
yeah,
all the way over there.
yeah, exactly. Okay, let's flip to tournament A because this is another one where, yeah, I mean Belgium's already in it because they won Eurobasket, and then you have Brazil, Czechia, China, Mali, and South Sudan. I mean, if I were going to make a guess as the next team to come out, Brazil is a really good team. Is Camila Cardoso playing?
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, that's
It,
my pick.
this whole group is about the bigs.
Yep,
We're going to be talking about post players for virtually every team in this group.
yep,
So yeah, there's going to be a lot of fighting in the paint. Um, China, obviously, we have the two that we've been seeing for years in
yep.
Li Yuru and Han Zhu.
Mhm.
They also have an 18-year-old kid who's 7'3", who we're going to be seeing sort of on the main stage for the first time, called Zhang Ziyi.
Love.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see what she can do at this sort of
She's
level.
7'3".
Yeah, exactly.
Ooh, that's wild. I mean, we have a few men's players who are around that, but oh, well, damn. Dang.
Um, I mean, even the Czech Republic, sorry, Czechia,
Yes.
have Chichova, Rising they're built around their bigs as well.
Mhm.
Mali have Mariam Koulibaly, who's been having a good season in Europe, and Sika Kone, who we've seen on the roster of like half the teams in the WNBA at one stage or another.
Yeah.
And South Sudan have Maria Gakdeng, who people might remember from the NCAA's.
Mhm.
Adut Bulgak, who was
Yeah.
drafted, I think, in the first round.
Yep.
Um, they also run a lot of stuff through their point guard, Delisha Washington, but they will be big underdogs.
Yeah.
And I mean, China, especially with home advantage, will probably expect to challenge for the top of the group with Belgium.
Yeah.
Brazil Brazil ought to get through from this group. They haven't qualified for a major tournament. They've missed the last four, if you include the Olympics and World Cup. They've missed the
Yeah.
last two World Cups and the last two Olympics. So this is their chance to finally qualify for something for the first
Yeah.
time in a long time. And with this
Yeah.
group, they ought to
They
get through.
they looked really great at the AmeriCup. So I'm hoping that, with now like Camilla being a little bit more developed and they have some other good players down there. So,
They've got
I would
some young
hope.
talent coming through, definitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
and Dantes as sort of the old established guard at this point.
Yeah.
But oh. and And then Czechia will probably expect to be good enough to hold off the African teams, but
Yeah.
we'll see because they're not the most consistent of the European nations that made it to this stage. But yeah, if I had to pick, I would expect the two African teams to finish in the two spots outside of qualification. But
Mhm.
yeah, it only in this sort of round robin format, you get one upset result and it could spin everything on its head in terms of
Miss
sneaking into
everything.
fourth rather than finishing fifth. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And like points are going to be big too. Like you need to be scoring a lot too to break those ties.
potentially, yeah. I mean, point
Yeah.
difference could certainly come into it. I mean, especially in a three-way tie. Yeah, the
Mhm.
FIBA's tradition is always to use head to head where they can, but obviously, if you end up with three teams tied, then often you end up 1-1 in the three-way tie break. So then it goes to
Yeah.
point difference, and we'll go
Yes.
into like the final day of all these groups doing lots of maths to try and work out the permutations.
Exactly.
That's always fun part of all this process.
Yeah, that's always the thing with these qualification tournaments. It's like the math at the end. I remember with Canada, is like they almost didn't get to the Olympics, and then it was like Spain, Hungary, and Spain, and everybody was watching that game, and then it ended up being a 1 point win, and everybody was going crazy. And I mean, it's the joy of qualification tournaments.
Yeah, I mean, especially when everything's such small groups, one result
Hmm.
and one point either way can create big swings, definitely.
Yeah, so let's get into what I guess we'll call the two major groups here that we're talking about. Let's start with Tournament C, and I think both of you. I mean, I have vested interest in this group, and you said that this group is quite interesting to you. And I mean, the group consists of it's taking place in Turkey, so Turkey is there as the home team, and then you have Hungary, Argentina, Australia, who's already through because they won the the Asia Cup, Canada and Japan. So yeah, I mean, I'm coming in here from the perspective of like Australia's already made it. For Canada, I mean, it it's an interesting time in Canadian basketball on the women's side. You have, of course, in this tournament, you don't have any of the NCAA players. So that's Silas Swords, that's Avery Howell, who has kind of been in the mix for the senior team. Delaney Gibb is someone who was huge in their tournaments last year. Toby Fournier is always in the mix, but all of them are playing in March Madness, so they're out of the picture. But then you also have all of the players that weren't in the AmeriCup last year. So all the WNBA players. You have Aaliyah Edwards, Kia Nurse, Bridget Carlton. You know, is there another one that I'm missing? Anyways, regardless, you have those three. And then you have the ones who have been playing in Europe. You have Kayla Alexander who's coming back. You have Sammy Hill. You have, and then the people who kind of have competed in a lot of these tournaments, but it's also one of the first times that the WNBA contingent is being coached by Nell Fortner, who is the new coach of Team Canada. And so for me, like, I'm going into this tournament for Canada extremely curious about what the product is going to look like on the court. Last summer, before the AmeriCup, I went to Team Canada camp, and there was such a huge emphasis, rightfully so, being put on defense, perimeter defense, and shooting, because those were the big things that Canada really struggled with in the Olympics. It was scoring, it was defending, it was stopping these big shooters on these other teams. And like, based on their AmeriCup performance, I mean, they did incredibly in that. They were able to, I saw like a big leap from their Olympic performance to that, but you also have to keep in mind that none of the WNBA players were there. So it's kind of like a balance. Now coming into this tournament, you have Nell Fortner's second tournament, like big tournament with the team. She's had now over a year to kind of establish herself as the coach, figure out what the system is going to be. But then you also have to kind of gameplay differently, because now you have Aaliyah Edwards, you have Bridget Carlton, who's always big for Canada, and then you have to figure out how to incorporate all the others as well. So, I mean, I'm super curious about how they're going to look, especially because they didn't really have a camp either. I've been seeing them all arriving in Turkey. So like Team USA has kind of had a chance to have a camp, and most of the players were in the United States and were able to come. But for Canada, I mean, we had players. Kia Nurse was in Nashville doing Athletes Unlimited. Aaliyah was in Unrivaled. Kayla Alexander, and most of them have been in Europe doing, playing in EuroLeague. So yeah, it's they're coming together. It's chemistry building. But they also like, this isn't an easy group. Like, you can't just say, oh, Canada's gonna win. Like, you have Japan, who Canada's competed with a few times on the big stage over the past few years, and Japan can shoot. Like those players can shoot the three ball really well. And so if your perimeter defense isn't on point, they're just gonna shoot you out of the gym, out of the arena. You have Australia, who Canada always struggles with because Australia has so much size, so much talent. I mean, other than the United States, I think they have the biggest WNBA population in terms of their team.
Probably them in France, I would imagine.
You also now have the fun dynamic that Sandy Brondello coaches the only Canadian team in the WNBA, and I know she's pumped. Like, she keeps on saying whenever she does media in Toronto that she's just like so excited to play against Canada, like on the national stage, because there's that fun kind of thing that now she coaches in Canada, and maybe she'll know some of the players a little bit as we get WNBA rosters hopefully eventually. But Australia is a huge hurdle for them in terms of winning. And like you said, every game matters in these tournaments. So not that Australia is like, oh, like we're trying to win, but Canada needs to try and their best to beat every single team so that they can, get in top three. And then, you have Turkey and Hungary as well, who maybe aren't going to be as, big for them as Australia, but at the same time, like Hungary was competing in that qualifying tournament last year for the Olympics. That ended up being like a huge crazy thing. And yeah, so it's an interesting group. I'm curious to see, like, from my perspective, I always come into it, okay, like how does Canada match up against these things? I mean, I'm confident that they will come out top 3 in this group, but what's your take on tournament C?
I mean, like you said, it's to me the most interesting because there are 4 teams legitimately competing for 3 spots.
Yeah.
In a lot of these groups, we're looking for sort of teams to fit into a final place or something like that. There are
Mhm.
there are 4 teams and potentially 5 really with Australia who won't necessarily win every game like you would expect a dominant team like the US to do.
Mm.
Australia could lose one game to a random team, and that would affect the maths for everything else. Um, I I think Canada have, even though they've had obviously WNBA players coming in and out at certain times, they do have a continuity in this squad
Yeah.
that does sort of stand out. That we've seen all of these names playing together before, so they do understand how each other plays. They understand the chemistry that's there between them, even though it was previously under a different head coach. So I do
Mhm.
think that helps. But yeah, this is tricky. This is going to be the interesting one because Canada, Japan, Turkey, Hungary, and Australia can all beat each other, and Japan are always incredibly entertaining to watch because they
So
play
entertaining.
so fast and the ball moves, the ball goes up. That won't change. They're currently coached by Corey Gaines, who longtime WNBA fans will remember from the Phoenix Mercury a long time
Mhm.
ago. Um, but that won't change how they play because that was a similar style when he was in the US and what has gone over to Japan. Um, Turkey are going to look a little different from what we've seen in recent tournaments because uh, Kennedy Burke has been naturalized and is now
Mhm.
their naturalized player. FIBA has a rule that you're only allowed one naturalized player on the team, which therefore means that Tierra McCowan won't be playing for Turkey, which obviously means you play a very different way because McCowan forces you to play a certain way on offense, feeding her and just trying to revolve around your one giant player in the low post. And they should be a lot more fluid. We'll see how used to that they are, how easily they adapt to that. They're always an unpredictable team. Turkey can beat anyone on their day or lose to literally anybody when it
Yeah.
isn't their day. Um,
Yeah.
Hungary are probably weaker, but could do anything as well. Um, they naturalized Catherine Westbeld, but she isn't in the final squad. They're going with Yvonne Turner instead as
Yep.
their naturalized player. Most of their strength is probably inside as well with Viard Kish and Dorky Uhash, who obviously people will remember from UConn and WNBA.
Mhm.
Um, they don't have Bernadette Hattar anymore, who used to be their big post inside, so it's a little bit of a turnover for them as well. And Argentina, I would expect to be just filling out the group. With all due respect, you would expect them to go 0-5. If they get a win out of this group, it will be an upset.
Yeah.
Um, One could happen, but yeah. Um,
Yeah. I
in
mean,
terms,
yeah.
sorry, I was just going to say
No.
people to look out for in this group. We've got Kokoro Tanaka is a guard for Japan, who again is draft eligible this year, assuming we actually have a draft at some point. Um, Ramu Takashiki, who played for Seattle a long time ago, is
Yep.
also back in the fold for Japan, so people can watch out for her. And Isabel Borles is in the Australia squad after being drafted
Yes.
by Atlanta a couple of years ago. So yeah, fans of the Dream could get a look at her because otherwise Australia is largely the people you know and
No
expect to
one
see in the
loves.
squad with Alana Smith, Magda Gore, Melbourne, Whitcomb, Kayla George. So yeah, that's like with Canada. This is mainly the same group with Australia that you know.
You know what? My ulterior motive is for Sandy to do her big one and convince some of them to come to the
I mean,
Do your big one, Sandy. Yeah,
I mean, you've also got her husband coaching Germany now as
I
well.
know.
So I
Yeah.
should have mentioned that when we were doing the other group. One of the interesting things with Germany is going to be how they adapt with a new head coach. So yeah, they've got Olaf
Yeah.
Lang now.
And I mean, he could do his big one and get people to Toronto too. Come on, Ola.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh man, but yeah, thinking about Canada, I mean, yeah, we talked a little bit about continuity, which is a huge thing. I mean, Kayla Alexander has been a staple of this team for so long, and I mean, especially when you're playing against Australia, Hungary with their very dominant bigs, Kayla Alexander is going to be a huge part of that. I also hope that they play Aaliyah Edwards a lot, not only beside Alexander, but also because she first of all, she just had an incredible season in Unrivaled, and she's really just coming into her own in terms of physicality, being able to defend. Her footwork has always been great. I mean, she's always played great for Canada, but I mean, she hasn't. I mean, we haven't really seen her since the Olympics, and I feel like there's been such a huge, just kind of like growth in her game since then. Um, and then, yeah, you have, I mean, Bridget Carlton is obviously going to be one of the biggest factors. Hopefully, she is able to have a good tournament. I mean, she was truly one of her, Kayla, there's a few other highlights of the Olympics, but Bridget Carlton, despite the fact that Canada didn't make it out of the group stage in the Olympics, played fantastic. And so she's going to be huge for them. We'll see how, Kia Nurse is able to perform. Hopefully, I mean, the shots will need to go in. We'll see how they're able to shoot. I know Nell Fortner's putting such a huge emphasis on 3-point shooting and is really just like drilling that home, both in the America Cup and here. So that will be a huge factor in what they do. And then you have people like Sammy Hill. I mean, Sammy Hill is always going to be the person that comes in and is like really gritty. She's going to, she's great at defending. She is a clutch 3-point shooter. She kind of plays like, she'll probably start. I could see her being like the starting guard, point guard, and have or Shea Colley. I mean, you also have Shea Colley now. And the thing about this roster too is that you have some of these players that are kind of they come in and out of the lineup because when you have the NCAA players, or sometimes you like, that's the thing about a team like Canada is that there's always some players who can't be there. And then, these players will come in and you don't know if they're going to make it onto the squad once September comes. So yeah, a few of those players as well, but a lot of names here. I mean, if you look through the roster, a lot of people that you'd probably recognize from NCAA, from a few little fringe WNBA spots. Yvonne Ejim is going to be a huge one. She's been playing. I believe she played in Spain this past off season, but she was with the Indiana Fever in training camp for a bit. And so, she's someone who could come back to the WNBA this year as well. Again, with the caveat of if we have a WNBA season. I feel like anytime we mention the WNBA, we got to do the if thing. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited. Like I said, there's a lot of for me unknowns about this team and what the system is going to look like under Fortner. I know their coaching staff is really excited and really happy about this squad and really pumped to kind of go into this first big major tournament after the America Cup and have their WNBA players and kind of experiment with what's going on. So yeah, I mean that I like we both said at the top, group tournament C is going to be interesting. That's one to kind of have your eyes on. But let's move on to Team USA. Because they're in tournament B. They're playing in Puerto Rico. They've already made it through. They have and then they're playing against New Zealand, Puerto Rico, of course, Senegal, Italy, and Spain. Yeah, I mean, the big game that you and I were talking about before this was United States versus Spain. But yeah, other than Spain, it's kind of like who else wants to win and make it in? It's kind of like anyone's game at this point because you have a few teams in there that are. I mean, this when you look at this is objectively probably the easiest group, unless take out USA and Spain, but for USA and Spain, one of the easiest groups.
Yeah, this is a fantastic draw for Italy, who would, because of how straightforward the group has turned out to be, ought to qualify relatively comfortably. They've screwed things up in the past in terms of qualifying for major tournaments, and they're not the absolute strongest team in Europe, but they had a good showing in Eurobasket last year. They've obviously got Xander Lassini, who we know how good she is from the WNBA. Lorela Kubai is good inside as well. Jasmine Keys is their naturalized American. They're missing Mathilde Villa, the young point guard who was again drafted in the US. But yeah, Italy ought to get through this group, and then it ought to be a kind of a 3-team morass for the final spot. Puerto Rico obviously will have home advantage, which will help. They'll have Aurelia Girantes will be on the ball a lot and will take a lot of shots because that's how she plays for this team. They need her to do that, but she won't always be efficient. But yeah, she'll get a lot of shots up. They don't have Maya Hollinshed in the group in the squad, but they have added Imani McGee-Stafford, who people may remember from the WNBA, who will probably provide a similar role in terms of doing all the rebounding, being the pivot inside. Senegal and New Zealand are both missing big pieces, even from the squads that might not have been good enough to qualify anyway. Senegal have lost Sierra Dillard, who used to be basically their central player, after all sorts of internal wrangling, and she basically pulled out after the last Afro Cup and decided she didn't want to play for them anymore. So New Zealand are missing Clarissa Leisure-Walker from UCLA, who would be their best player. They also don't have Ezra McGoldrick, who was their leading scorer at the Asia Cup last year. So those two are weak enough that Puerto Rico, especially with home advantage, will think they've got a decent chance to qualify. And they've qualified for the World Cup before. So it wouldn't be the first time, but this is not the strongest group, as you say. This is what I've referred to as the group of life, because that last spot looks ready for someone to grab. But obviously, especially for a lot of our audience, the interesting element is going to be seeing Spain with our Fam and Iana Martin, who will both be drafted, assuming we have a draft this year. Fam is probably going to go top 3. Martin may well go in the first round somewhere. It's going to be interesting to see them up against the US, and then just the US squad, which is a lot of turnover from previous ones. They've gone young, but with sort of a few old heads to sort of carry them and sort of teach them how to play for the US, teach what it means to wear that jersey. But to a certain extent, they're fighting for spots because there are still people missing. Brianna Stewart isn't in this squad. Asia Wilson isn't in this squad. Alyssa Thomas isn't. So there are people you'd expect to come in for the actual World Cup, assuming they're healthy. So the rest of the players, the young ones coming through, are fighting for spots because they'll have to prove that they deserve to be there.
Yeah, that's the exact thing I was going to say, is that this Team USA, and I mean, it's the thing with Team USA, because there's so much talent in that system, is that this squad that you're seeing is not going to be the World Cup squad, obviously, because Asia Wilson is going to have what I could only, and everyone else could only assume, is a guaranteed spot if she wants to play, if she's healthy, which, I mean, knock on everything that everyone is healthy, but so you have her, you have Brianna Stewart, is Sabrina, yes, no?
I assume UNESCO's still hurt.
Yes, so she's probably a lock.
Unrivaled due to injury.
But then you have these players who have played in the junior levels of Team USA, of course, Caitlin Clark, Paige Beckers, Angel Reese, who are going to have their first senior Team USA experience. And then you also have some players who were supposed to play but are injured, like Aaliyah Boston was supposed to be a big part of this team, got injured in Unrivaled, so then they had to make a few shifts. And so, there's a lot of people in this system, like you said, who are doing a tryout. And it's also going to be curious to see how they address the turnover, because a big glaring hole over the past few years, not glaring hole, but the most turnover they've seen is in the point guard position. So it's trying to figure out who amongst this talent pool that you have Paige Beckers, you have Caitlin Clark, you Kelsey Plum is kind of in there, you have Sabrina Ionescu, who is going to take on that starting point guard position for Team USA, because they have the luxury of having so many options to.
You didn't even mention Chelsea Gray, who
my goodness,
would be my first choice.
That's the thing, is that there's so many, and then I mean, then there's the other layer of the public discourse now. We already saw it last time in the Olympics when Caitlin Clark didn't make the team. And that, like, going back, I mean, now it's like, who cares about this conversation because it was 2 years ago, but like, I respect the decision at the time. She had been playing so much basketball over the past few years. And going with, say, like the more veteran squad for the Olympics, sure. You know what? And that's the thing with Team USA. They have the luxury of being able to do that because they have so much talent. So you also have the idea that like people expect Caitlin Clark to kind of be the starter or the whoever of this team. And I think what a lot of these fans who are going to be watching Team USA for the first time now don't understand is that international basketball is so different from the WNBA. And don't get me wrong, I do think like if healthy, Caitlin Clark will do very well. She's a great shooter. She lives for these big tournament moments. She, obviously is probably itching to play after not having played very much basketball in the last year. But there's also a lot of other people who have played in Olympics, have played in World Cups, who, like you said, Chelsea Gray is probably up there top for that starting spot. So it's going to be interesting. And I feel like you and I are just kind of on the outside where it doesn't really affect us. So we can just kind of sit back and watch everybody fight about.
Yeah, I mean, with Clark as well. I mean, she hasn't played any basketball since July last year. So we're talking like 9 months of rust that she's going to be knocking off into these games. Whereas, like most of the players in this tournament, like you say, have been playing in Europe or playing in Unrivaled or playing wherever. I mean, some in South America, some in China. So yeah, it's gonna be an interesting squad. Well, maybe we get to see Beckers and Clark playing in a backcourt together to sort of be the next generation. But yeah, what we see at this tournament's going. I mean, obviously, it's also the first tournament for Cara Lawson herself, just coming as the head coach. This is why I was a little bit surprised that. I mean, maybe the players turned them down, but I was a little bit surprised that this squad isn't even stronger because the US aren't going to have many chances to actually get their squad together to build any kind of chemistry before the World Cup itself. The WNBA, assuming we end up with the schedule that they've already released, is taking a very brief little break, which is going to give them about 5 minutes to greet each other and
and then play.
Have 2 shoot-arounds, and then they go straight into the group stage at the World Cup in Germany, yeah. So, yeah, I thought if they could have talked them all into going, I don't know how many of them would have wanted to, but whether Wilson and Stewart would have actually agreed to go to this tournament, and then rather than using it as a tryout, you take pretty much the 12 that you're expecting to take in September and try and build the chemistry for that tournament. But instead, it's more of a tryout. They're taking a few of the veterans and a lot of players who are playing for a spot. And yeah, we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing Spain because it's a little bit of a transition for them with Fam and Martine coming in. They don't normally have these youngsters like showing up and getting to play this soon because Spain have a lot of depth as well, like we talked about with France.
Yeah.
So yeah, seeing Fam and Martine against that level of competition is going to be very interesting. And yeah again, like Spain should dominate most of the rest of this group. But yeah.
I think I'm a little bit sad that we're not seeing France in this group as opposed to Spain. Like seeing the Team USA France matchup, but like the next generation of like Dom Malunga and like versus Paige and like all of that storyline. I mean, we'll probably see it once we get to September, but yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to Team USA this week, I mean, yeah, like you said, we're trying to figure out who. It's not just about like talent too. It's who works best in the system.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's who plays this style of international FIBA basketball best. It's who is going to be healthy because that's the other factor too. Is like it's a shorter break than the Olympic break usually is, and it's coming right at the end of the WNBA season. And if last season was any indication, and again, this is the caveat, if we actually have a WNBA season, because who knows, we might just have the whole summer off and they can all just like go on runs and, train for the World Cup. But there were so many injuries last year. So like you can't even think about like, oh, this is going to be the 12 that you see, or this person is going to make. You know, and again, that's the beauty of Team USA basketball, where they have so many options to go through. Um, and I think that's why you're kind of seeing a few players too, because the field is so deep. You're seeing players like Alicia Gray flip and decide to compete in 3x3, because this week is also the 3x3 World Cup as well in Thailand, I believe. And they just announced Team USA's team today, and it's Shakira Austin is going, Alicia Gray is going, and I don't have it in front of me, but there's other players. And yeah, so you're seeing like with 3x3 becoming bigger and bigger, you're seeing players just kind of commit and kind of stay on that side, because if you're really really good at 3x3, like you can win at such a high level instead of trying to like compete to like for minutes on this Team USA like 5-on-5 squad that is so deep, and that you actually have to like, you know, fight for the chance to even make the like camp squad as opposed to the actual squad. So yeah, it's an interesting time for Team USA. I feel like the other thing too that is interesting to me is that like there's so much guard depth, and there's so much like, but then like when you think about their front court, it's interesting because obviously Team USA has a ton of, I mean, you have Aaliyah Boston, and like a few of those other players that are like the second level of under Asia Wilson, Brianna Stewart kind of vibes. But I mean, you think about the future, and like that position is a little bit less, I guess, serviced when you think about how many players are coming up for Team USA. So it's good. It's an interesting kind of transition period for Team USA.
I mean, the wrong being coming through as well. So I mean, there's players on the way
Yeah.
for USA. They're not going to be short of big, but
No, they'll be
uh,
good.
the
But
the 3x3 squad is Veronica Burton,
there we go.
Naz Hillman, Alicia Gray, and
Love it.
Shakira Austin. By the way,
Love it.
but yeah, like you said, I mean, I think they're trying because the US didn't win the gold medal in 3x3 at the Olympics. They're
Mhm.
trying to build a squad there where the players stick with that, and they can try and build some chemistry on that side as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, like you say, someone like Alicia Gray might think, I could make the 5-on-5 squad. I would maybe even say probably, but if I become part of the 3x3 unit, then I'm definitely going to the next Olympics if I just become part of the mainstay of the US. So yeah, you can understand people leaning that way, especially if USA Basketball ask them to. Obviously, they're never short of wings. So someone like Alicia Gray,
Yeah.
you know, whether you might sort of end up just off the end of the roster in sort of 13th, 14th spot rather than getting in.
Yeah, and it's like, especially when you have players like Caitlin and Paige who are so good, they might think, "Oh,
Scoring guards, yeah.
let's take another guard and not take as many wings." And then someone like Alicia Gray kinda, and it's so crazy to think because Alicia Gray is truly one of the best players in the WNBA, and, like, to think that Team USA is that deep where it's like, "We could cut Alicia Gray," is crazy. Also, if anybody wants to become a Canadian citizen, I'm kidding.
Why I keep suggesting to the Bet sisters that they ought to
Yeah,
take up their British passports and come
there
over
you
and play for
go.
us rather than. Unfortunately, they're both part of the USA basketball system already, so yeah,
Yeah,
it doesn't look likely. But we'll hold out
exactly.
hope until they completely give up on us.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm not worried about Canada. We got Sila coming, Big Cy. We got Savvy Swords about to start at Kentucky. We
She's
got
got a sister, doesn't she? Yeah.
She does. Oh, those two. They're also like so funny and wonderful. So like they're just great to talk to. But the Savvy is, well, because Sila's like the shooter, but Savvy plays a little bit more of like, she's a little bit more of like a driving wing, and so they complement each other quite well. But yeah,
Rather than just being
yeah. So
competitive or
yeah,
reproducing the same skills. Yeah.
exactly. They really mesh well together. So I mean, Canada, we got good things coming. Delaney Gibb is doing great over in the Big 12 right now. We got Avery Howe. Like we're good. We got people coming up.
You've seen it on the men's side with Canada, where you guys have gotten massively stronger in like the last 10 years or so,
Oh yeah.
and yeah,
Canada basketball's coming up.
I have to imagine that yeah, the sort of the same pipeline that's led to the increasing strength of the men's team has to be working on the women's side to a certain extent.
Oh
Sometimes
yeah.
it's behind a little bit in terms of the time frame, but But yeah, that has to be working there as well.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the sport's growing so much in Canada. And I mean, you have to think that something like the tempo coming this year is only going to
True.
continue. I mean, the effects of that obviously you won't see for probably another decade because, the people who are going to be inspired by the tempo are like, kids. But yeah, I mean, yeah, on the men's side, you have some wild names, and that's all because I mean the growth of the sport globally, the NBA coming to Canada, and just like the investment that Canada basketball has put really into like developing young talent as well. So yeah, I mean it's a fun time, and this week I feel like with all of the stuff happening with the WNBA this week, with college, I mean, college is its own kind of thing, which is fun and exciting. But at the same time, having like an international tournament right in the middle of all of this is also super fun because, like I said, it's a different style of basketball, and I'm excited for actually like new fans to get into it this year, considering you have so much new talent coming in for Team USA.
Yeah, I mean, and young international players who
Mhm.
hopefully we'll be seeing more of in the US with more money coming into the WNBA, whichever side wins the CBA arguments, or
Yeah,
if they come to some kind of compromise,
yeah, and
then
more spots.
we should see more international players because more money will be there, so more of them will want to play in the US.
Hmm.
Our fam has already said she wants to play in the WNBA, and
Yep.
that's a big part of why people are talking about her as a number one, number two pick
Hmm.
because these players actually want to play in the US. We've seen more players from Spain and France, teams who have normally sort of asked their players to stay in Europe.
Yep.
So now, like, yeah, seeing these young players come through for their national teams is a lot of fun because normally overseas these players are pros from the age of 17, maybe 18. Um, you know, some of them keep their NCAA eligibility alive for a little longer, so they're not actually getting paid, but they're essentially playing for pro teams.
Yep.
But that means that you do see these players at a younger age. You wouldn't necessarily see an 18-year-old who's American playing for the US on an international stage, but you do see Pham and Martine and Malonga. Layla Khan will be playing for France,
Yep.
Tanaka for Japan. So, yeah, you do see these young players getting a chance on the international stage.
Yeah, and they're really exciting. And yeah, I think we're at a stage in the WNBA with expansion that the obvious like pipeline is that we're going to be seeing so many more international players come and play in the WNBA. And I mean, we already saw it last year. The Golden State Warriors aren't Warriors, the Golden State Valkyries were basically like, their whole expansion draft strategy was like, who do these teams have the rights to? And let's bring some people over from overseas. And then that kind of bled into the rest of the league, when needing to fill those roster spots that you lost. And now with you think about development spots opening in the WNBA now, you think about just more spots opening in terms of more roster spots because we're going to have two new teams this year and even more coming up. I mean, we're going to see these players that are going to play this week. Like these are going to be big names in the WNBA in the next few years. So it's exciting to get that preview of what's to come.
Yeah, we should probably tell people where they can watch these games as
That
well.
would be so smart. Actually, okay, you should probably hit the international because I only know that they're going to be on TSN in Canada. So if you're in Canada, you can watch Canada in their World Cup qualifying on TSN. But Richard, where can you watch it wherever else you are?
Well, internationally, as in over where I am in Europe, FIBA have a website called Courtside 1891,
Yep.
which you can. I think for me, it's like £9 for the women's qualifiers.
Yeah,
But
for me for AmeriCup, it was I think like $15 for the entire tournament pass.
yeah, so it's not the greatest streaming website. I did compare it to Flow Hoops, which Americans have told me
Yeah,
about over the years in
yeah,
recent weeks. But yeah, it does work generally speaking. So yeah,
yeah.
that would be how to watch it over here. For the US, the TNT recently signed a
Mm,
big money deal with
yep,
FIBA to broadcast a lot of international basketball. So I haven't got the schedule in front of me because it's hard to check these things when you're not even in the US.
yeah.
But I imagine they will at least be showing the US games and probably some of the rest of the tournament on the sort of TNT, TBS family of channels, and you'll be
Yes.
able to watch it via that.
And the thing with
Um,
the USA's tournament is that it's in Puerto Rico, so time zone wise, it'll probably be very good for people in North America to watch. In terms of Canada, their tournament is in Turkey, so all of Canada's games are either at 9:30 in the morning or 12:30 Toronto time. So take with that what you will.
Yeah, that's the fact that all of these games are scattered around the world also means the tournament is essentially starting Tuesday night for Americans
Yeah.
because the tournament in China is obviously at normal
True.
times of day in China. So it's about
Man,
I think the first game's about 1:30 in the morning US Eastern time, something like
it's
that.
truly like 24/7 hoops for like a week.
Pretty much, yeah. This is going to be If you want to watch all of it, it's going to be tough
Yeah, you
because
could literally
because
just watch basketball
you have to
24
assume
hours a
you
day.
would want to sleep at some point. Yeah,
Eh.
yeah. You might want to pick and choose which games are worth watching.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited for it. It's going to be a good time.
Yeah, it's just a shame Great Britain didn't manage to qualify, but I
It's
have to
okay.
cope with that a lot, unfortunately. So
We'll
yeah,
accept you here in Canada. You can come cheer for Canada. Oh man. Well, thank you so much for listening to our FIBA Women's World Cup qualifier preview. Make sure to check out herhoopstats.com for more on, I mean, everything else going on. There's a ton of college conference tournament and national tournament kind of previewing and recapping and stats and all that stuff that you can check out if you subscribe over at herhoopstats.com. Make sure to like and subscribe this podcast wherever you're listening and check us out on social media as well. We'll be back tomorrow for another episode of the Her Hoop Stats podcast. Richard, thanks so much for joining me, and we'll see you next time.